give me a minute while I get the last little details done here. As you all know, if this is your repeat that visit to our Convert series, that this is only version 2 of me doing live streaming. So let's hope that I don't cancel it like last time. Let's see. Okay, we are live on LinkedIn, it looks like. Yes, okay, perfect. And we are here in our Zoom room, and Ryan is still here. This is fantastic. All right, great. So let's get started. Really, really pleased, everyone, that you're here, and very pleased to introduce Ryan Levander. And the reason I'm excited about this is that Ryan has done a really interesting trajectory for his career. So he's the founder and head of analytics at Navel, and he started his career in this world as web dev with a background in computer science. And I find that interesting because along his path, he always pivoted to find what was missing for his clients. And as you know, finding your niche based on what your clients need and want is really, really important. He pivoted to some video media and then analytics, and now finds himself giving stellar service and real insight to those partners. I really am glad to have you here, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that great intro, Morgan. And yeah, super excited to be here and to share some mistakes along the way and a few things I've learned in between.
Excellent. So a little bit about the format today. We'll have the video recording for people within a couple of days of the event. Ryan is going to have some slides to go through. He's going to take questions. I'm going to be taking a look at the chat in both LinkedIn and in Zoom. And we really encourage you to open up your mic once he's got through the first 10-15 minutes and jump in with your questions. If you're too shy, then I will read them out, but really encourage people to open up and talk directly to him. All right, Ryan, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. And grateful to have you wherever you're joining from today. I have a few slides, pretty informal for sure. I'm not a big, structure of slides kind of guy. So there'll be plenty of time for questions along the way. And feel free to either, I think, put them in probably in chats, and Morgan will definitely surface those, like she said, after the first 10 to 15 minutes. So let's run through a few things. Should be able to see my screen there. Let me know if not, Morgan, but
yeah, looks good. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, we're going to be talking about 3 things CRO agencies must know to succeed in today's world of CRO. A little bit about me. Like Morgan said, my name is Ryan Levander. My consultancy name is Red Navel Consulting. My last name backwards is Red Navel. So maybe you guys think I'm not quite as weird as you did when you first started, because it actually means something, Red Navel, versus just kind of a really weird name. So that was the genesis for my name. And it's actually a really long family tradition of my grandpa was called Red Navel, et cetera. So I'm kind of living on a family tradition as well, too. So I have an unhealthy obsession with marketing. Other nerds would just say like, no, that's just right on par. I do the same thing, too. I just love to learn, not just in marketing, but obviously that's what I do. And so been through tons of courses, hire lots of people to help make me better, who are a lot smarter than me. So just love it and can't get enough of it. Now my focus is on measurement in CRO. I call analytics measurement. I'm a big fan of Chris Mercer and measurementmarketing.io for a shout out. I learned a lot from him. And so I like to call it measurement. And that's, again, the 2 things that we do. In my spare time, when I'm not being a nerd on marketing, I really love to hike with my 3 dogs, seen to the right there. From left to right, we have Taco, String Bean, which is my dog, and Pancho Villa. The Taco and Pancho Villa are my girlfriends. The irony is my girlfriend is from Mexico, and the only dog of Mexican descent is the Chihuahua, which is mine, and his name is String Bean, which is very not a Mexican sounding name. So that's kind of the irony there. I really love to trail run in the mountains here. I live in Denver, Colorado, and we're within an hour to really tall mountains. And I love to finish a mountain running day off with beers on a patio, and there's never enough time to read. So like Morgan mentioned, I do have quite a vast background in marketing. And I just wanted to preface this by saying everything sort of like successful and choosing the right direction that I've done has been from listening to my market, listening to the users, whether they're my clients or whether they're, people on LinkedIn, prospects, etc. Excuse me. So I originally have a background in computer science, used that almost none at all after I got out of college. The frameworks and how to think and solve problems are crucial, and I still use those today. But I had a very small stint with like having originally like a web development agency, WordPress web development. As we know, that's quite a commodity nowadays, and pivoted to video production after that. And then kept listening to my customers, and they kept saying, and again, and prospects, the videos are great, but we just want to know how more customers, what they do after they watch the video, and how we can get more customers, more leads, more sales. And I translated that speak into, okay, that means I need to learn analytics to a deep level. And that started my self-teaching and learning from others on the analytics space. So like I said, our focus today, niching down and branding, getting that first client, and then service tiers and what to charge. There's a 0.5. There's before we get to the first step of knowing how far down to niche, you really need to make sure you have an awesome product, aka your skill set. Sometimes there maybe are actual products you might deliver, into like a productized service, but really we are all service providers here, right? And we want to make sure that that product is good enough to get more clients, right? You don't want to not be, realistically, at least at the very minimum in the top 20% of service providers. And you don't want to be outside of that and start to get more clients, because obviously you're going to experience a lot of churn, and reputation is all we have. I say that pretty boldly. It's just super important, because the CRO world, and even if you think about just marketing as a whole, it's not that huge, but especially when you get into the CRO niche, like you're about 3 degrees of separation between anyone, kind of a thing. So if you're not doing an amazing job, and at least let's maybe not say amazing, because that can seem daunting right away. If you are not better than your client's normal, then that is not going to be something that they're going to want to share with others, and of course retain you and keep you going on like a monthly retainer. So don't open up shop until you actually you have those skills. And how do you know is probably the next obvious question. You really have to have an open dialogue and have open communication with your customers early on, especially when you will talk about getting your first client. But you have to know that you are better than their normal, and hopefully you're a couple levels better than their normal, because you don't want them just to be like, oh yeah, this is great, this is better than our usual version. You want them to be really fired up so that they're going to actually refer you without you having to ask, because that's always awkward if you like ask them to refer you. But if you just do an amazing job, they're going to want to do that, because they're going to want to introduce you to their friends, other people they know that you can do work for them, which is, we all know, the best way of marketing is referrals. And that's honestly how we get 80+% of our new clients nowadays, is just from referrals. So niching down and branding. So after you have that great product, or at least a good enough product to go to market with, you want to be, I always love this quote, a meaningful specific and not a wandering generality. I forget where it came from. I wish I was smart enough to have thought about it myself, but not much is original nowadays anyway, in terms of quotes. But this basically means to me that instead of like, I am, the best at customer acquisition, okay, that's still incredibly broad. First off, that acquisition means different things to different people. Is that a lead? Is that a customer? Defining things can be important, but, making sure that you are niche down enough. So like, does that mean you're in PPC? Does that mean you're in like retention with maybe SaaS clients and recurring revenue type clients? you have to be niche down enough. An example here, excuse me, an example here. I have a friend named Dave. He is my schema guy for SEO. When schema comes to mind in a page isn't marked up appropriately, and it's maybe not, winning featured snippets in the SEO world, it's not just basically as rich as it could be, which Google then just rewards those results and it just ranks them higher. If I have a schema problem and it's something that if I can't fix it within the first, 10, 20 minutes, I'm probably going to go to Dave because he is the schema guy. Like that's what he does. Of course, he doesn't only do schema. Like he does SEO as a whole. He's not going to just do, like, most clients aren't big enough to hire a schema guy and then have someone totally different for SEO, but he's made a name for himself being the schema guy. So if you have a schema problem, he's the one to contact. You'll contact him for that. And you'll gain the trust for he's good at that function. And then, if he's also good at SEO as a whole, he's already gained the trust for the schema and he's got his foot in the door that way. So then he can provide the overall service for SEO. And that's a great example of how we usually do that with clients, is we're more seen as a measurement agency as opposed to a CRO agency. We're starting to be known for both. And that's kind of a formality of what people know us for. It doesn't really matter in our minds as long as we can help them and they're a good fit for us. But we almost always start. I think there was one client in the last 2 years, and they had a good enough Google Analytics setup to where we didn't have to do a full audit. Every other client, we always start with a GTM, GA, and now Looker Studio, aka previously Data Studio. We always start with that initial audit because we have to be able to trust the data before we test, right? And so we start with a measurement audit, and then we say, it's kind of like the longest upsell ever. Do you want fries with that, right? Kind of a thing. It's like, all right, cool. You know where you are on the map with your analytics. Do you want help to get to where you want to go? AKA CRO, and CRO being one function of that, obviously, like plenty of different traffic sources, et cetera, PPC, but we don't do PPC. Like we would recommend someone because that's not, like, we can't be good at everything. And so you have to be niche down enough and make sure you're niche down enough. That's really important. Make sure you don't go, like, I think it's very rare that people go too narrow. I forget, I think it's Ratishi is his name. He's in the CRO world. He's in his LinkedIn profile. I was going to take a screenshot. I should have here, but he says, I'm the Shopify product page guy, which that's really specific. But if you think about it, there's so many that's not even too niched, right? So don't be afraid to go narrow so that you are someone's exact answer and you're not competing with everyone. So getting that first client, so you have a great product, a great service you provide. You've cornered a market, so you're not going after the whole market, but a portion of that. Now it's just about getting your first client. Don't be focused on money, as we all are. I know I was right away trying to, you have to make enough money to make ends meet, obviously. But it's always good to not have to focus on that. You really just want to work with someone so you can get that feedback, because really your first client is research to know that if people love what you have to offer. So yes, you're going to get money for what you do, but it's really more about getting that first person so that you can understand if this is valuable to people and what you need to change to make it even more valuable. It's also really important to not get in too deep. In my experiences, most clients, I would say it's getting to be a little bit more where we help educate, but still it's about 70% of clients, they're hiring us to be their like CRO department where they don't have an existing CRO function. That means also that they're not going to have developers and designers to just they already have developers and designers. They already have things to do, right? They don't have extra time. If they do, it would be kind of weird if they had just, oh yeah, we have 30 hours to spend on random development design stuff. That's not how it really ever goes. And so it's important to make sure that while you get the first client, there's little objections on the money side of things. You do like price it, and we'll talk about that next, appropriately, so that okay, we're going to test with you, but we're going to need to cover development costs, build in development costs, build in design costs, build in QA, build in these things so that it's testing is kind of like an iceberg. Sometimes the client just sees the A/B screenshot that's on the surface level, but there's much more beneath it, and you want to make sure you charge for that and you're not really running yourself into the negative from a more time perspective. And I put here on getting your first client is to sometimes, again, this is kind of going back to that, like, be better than their normal, but 2 levels better than their normal, so that they're just really inclined to share with you. Quick example for a client we started testing with back in March. They're a pool supplies client. Their expectations coming in were that we were do 3 to 5 tests per month. And they were really just surprised at the initial. We went out of the gates pretty fast, and we did a full PDP redesign, and that made them, I think it was like, $40,000 to $50,000 within like a month time span. So it almost, I mean, it was such a big win, and they were so excited from the start that I think they were thinking more of their expectations were more, maybe let's start slower and maybe do some like copy test, button testing, and things like that. We didn't get a good feel for what their expectations were, but we very much exceeded those. And I was on a call with one of the other clients that was on this call, and they talked about it even over there. So I knew they were super jazzed up about this whole process. And so sometimes it's nice. Putting into. Sometimes it's nice to have like referral incentives in the contract. That's a bit formal for me. Some people do that. As long as it's clear, like, you're also going to reward them. It's not just we appreciate word of mouth. We'll actually incentivize it as well too. But again, if you have a great product, hopefully they just do that naturally. This is an example. I was at Traffic and Conversion Summit 2 weeks ago in San Diego. This is kind of like it's more broad. It's more for like the home for marketers is kind of how Ryan Dice phrases it. And I agree, it's pretty broad, but there was a really great talk. My favorite one by far was by Roland Frazier. He talked about combating inflation with testing pricing. And I used my auto recorder and sat in the front like a good student and recorded the conversation, because I love to go back and listen to some of the different things. The number one word he used was test in this talk. And while the strategic advice, and clearly he's at a level where he's only leading the strategy, he's not doing the testing himself. It's so easy to say and smart to say, but really hard to implement tests when you get into pricing, because of being fair to your users. There's laws against this of discrimination. If one person sees this price, another person sees this price, like, it's really hard to actually split that. And in some countries, you just can't do that. You have to do before after tests or different ways of testing. So again, like, everyone in that room was so captivated, and everyone wanted to test right after that. But no one understood, very few understood, I think, the implications and the complexity of this. So we are absolutely in demand. And I think it's important to have that mindset, like, don't, lower your costs, maybe to get that first client. But if they're really jazzed up and really excited, then we can find that sweet spot for pricing. This was one tangible example with the clients. And this is important kind of on the politics side of things, to make sure that you interject yourselves into other parts of the team when relevant. They wanted to test a button on the new homepage redesign, essentially. And I saw that and got in front of that. Sometimes it's not always easy to do, as in Slack. But I did see that, and I said, okay, before we just roll out this new homepage version, can we test it? Can we make sure that they are aligning with our expectations, AKA our hypothesis, right? Sometimes I like to use the word expectations to not make it sound as formal with a hypothesis, but that's really, they mean the same thing, right? So we ran this test. I think this was only in the span of a week. We saw that and we would probably run a little bit longer to make sure we get full significance, full everything from the data side of things. But just as an example, and their main goal with the CTAs was to try and get more people on a demo for their product. The variation lost out, like, it just did not get as many demos. And using the data as an example, and not just saying to the client, it lost, but going a step further and saying, if you were to just roll out this new variation that you wanted to do without testing it, you would have lost $2,700, because they put the value of a demo at $100, right? And it's really important, if you're a lead generation site or like a SaaS site where you don't sign up and you're not like an e-com site when you buy right away. It's really important. You have to assign a dollar value to a lead. Otherwise, it's going to take longer and you have to like send cookies to the CRM and wait for them to mature into a lead. And it just gets to be complex, and you should still do that, but you really should ask the client, what do you value a lead as? And if they don't have an answer, figure that out so that you can actually assign a dollar value to a lead. Because instead of just saying the test lost, it reframes it and says, you would have objectively lost $2,700 in 5 days, right? Obviously, that compounded over time is a lot more than that. So that's an example of sharing real life value. And now they're going to be coming to me first when they have even new ideas before the page is even designed. So that being pretty important. So service tiers and pricing and what to charge. This is always a meaty topic and a little bit complex. We're going to be changing our pricing at some point in 2023, probably the start of the year, but we currently charge fixed. That's it. We really don't want it to be that complex, and I want the energy to be focused on the testing and the value we provide, and not calculations of pay per performance. I mean, that's what some agencies do, and that's admirable and great. But I've found in seeing others do that, I've been a part of teams where I've seen others do that, and talking with customers and approaching into that area, more time is spent on the contract negotiation, and honestly, more money goes to attorneys than actual testing. So that doesn't have to be the way, but it can be touchy. And I don't want to spend my energy on that. I want to spend my energy on testing. And so we charge, probably more than most, but we charge enough to not have to worry about, are we charging enough kind of a thing. That's just my advice that way. And we can get into more details of that. So there's fixed, which is what we do, pay per performance. Again, you're going to get a ton of clients that are raising their hands saying, let's do this. Because you only get paid in this scenario, you only get paid if your tests win and based on percentages, et cetera. So be careful with that. Again, no objections, but you have to really make sure you're not only getting the right company and the right people to work with, but the right phase the company is at as well. There's hourly. I would not charge hourly because it doesn't put any value on, your time and efficiencies. Maybe makes sense if you're doing a very small, maybe you're doing consulting for an existing team with CRO. That might make sense. But I would always say you have to buy at least a block of hours or, et cetera, and use them in this time frame. Base plus incentivize is where we're heading, to say you're going to charge this much per month regardless. And then if we win X percent, then we're going to get this much as a result. So it's a combination of the fixed and the pay per performance. And this way, really the goals are aligned, right? And so it's like you get us, you get our expertise, you get the execution of it, whether it's consulting or consulting plus execution, you get both of those. And based on what they get, obviously it's a higher price if they get both of those. But if we help you reach your goals, then we're going to get a bonus for doing that, right? If you want to get this much more money per year, obviously focus on the revenue. Sometimes it's an MQL or whatever the case may be based on SaaS or e-commerce. But the further you can get down to that dollar sign in the attribution, the easier it's going to be for them to say, yeah, if you can help me get there, I'll of course pay you that as a bonus. We can get into some of this in a bit, but wanted to pause for any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that Jyoti had a few questions. Jyoti, do you want to open your mic and ask those directly? Or I can be your conduit if you like, but you are able to do that.
Hey, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hey, Jyoti.
All right. Hey, Ryan. So I have recently started my own CRO agency, and it's been like 3-4 months, and I'm pretty new in this. And of course, we are doing those exercises to, finding our niche and everything. Where I'm getting a little stuck is how do you run tests when data is not sufficient enough to get statistically significant results? Usually it would require for us to run a test for more than 4 weeks, but that's not appreciated, and that basically takes everything slow. So that doesn't really make sense. So what is your experience in that? Because at this point of time, we are not going to get clients with huge traffic volume, right? So this is a tricky part. So that comes to the crux of my question, that then between choosing between experiment velocity versus getting a statistically significant result out of a test. What should I
Awesome.
prefer and how?
It's such a good question. I'm so passionate about this. So thanks for that for sure. Because we currently have one client who's borderline sometimes. They're fairly seasonal, so we're kind of heading into times where they drop their traffic a little bit. They sell pool supplies, and so naturally less people are like anxious to buy pool supplies in the wintertime, kind of a thing. So yeah, awesome question. I think there's two ways to approach this. One is probably the better way, at least, to approach it. And I would try this first, is to, and I agree with you taking a step back on, like, if there generally is longer than, I would say, like 5 to 6 weeks at the most. That is, you just run into so many external validity threats, cookie expirations, and things like that. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, where it's like you just generally don't want to run tests longer than that time frame, because, like, things change, in not just on the website, like the world changes at the pace we're going, where like that can honestly throw things. So I do think it makes sense to do maybe like in excess of qualitative research. And maybe if you want to comment on that, so it sounds like clearly the GA data, the data people going to their site, is less. Could you talk to maybe if you have done qualitative research, one, and then what have you done, and do you feel like it helps with kind of the quantitative research? Because that usually is a really helpful to do a lot of qualitative research.
Understood. So in our case, on the research side, of course, everything is super strong at our end. And we do cover like end-to-end every type of a research that's possible, from quantitative to qualitative to review mining to heuristic to like everything. But the problem comes in when we run that A/B test, right? So we do get a lot of great ideas of the test from all of this research that we perform. But then ultimately it comes down to that, okay, what's the data points ultimately collected by my version A and version B? And then if that's statistically significant for me to confidently say that, okay, it's because of my version B, for example.
Right. And can you talk about the goals? Is it like only the end goal, or are you trying to go maybe back a step or two to track more like higher in the funnel goals, so to speak? Is it with all data across the board, or is it only when you track like new customers or new leads?
So for e-commerce clients, of course, there can be different goals set up at every funnel step, right? So I don't see a lot of problem there, at least. But for lead generation clients, for example, there are generally just one-step landing page with a form opening up in the second page or as a pop-up, right? So that's the funnel basically there. So in those scenarios, finalizing on the secondary goals with clients comes to of little or no value. Like getting leads is the only thing in those senses.
Yep, totally get it. Less of a funnel, so to speak, when we're talking like a lead gen or even like a SaaS sometimes too. Like it's, it's not as structured as ecom kind of a thing. So makes sense. I would do, like, it sounds like you might have done already enough qualitative research per se. I would summarize those research learnings and roll out those changes, and not in a test, just roll them out and do like a before after scenario. Because again, it's probably gonna sometimes it's like you have to break it up based on sections of the site. I think Pep talked about this in his CRO agencies and CXL course, where it's like on low traffic sites, sometimes you have to just like either do all of the changes at once. So it's almost like you're kind of doing like, a heuristic, accessibility. You're just like you're squashing all the bugs at once. It's kind of like the same mindset of like, you're just rolling out all of the changes at once. And it might make sense to, again, do it based on, these are all the motivation things we saw, and you like put those all at once. And then maybe these are all the clarity issues. We're changing all those at once. Or if you don't even have that much data, just change them all, but just do it before or after, because that's probably basically where you're at. And then hopefully, that does improve the leads. And then they can see, going back to the measurement side of things, like, oh, if PPC is converting or organic's converting, let's do more of that. And then hopefully that will get you to be able to test more. But initially the changes will probably just be to roll them out, and to make sure you're really good on the really diligent on the annotation side of things, as well, so that of course, when and what were your expectations, just like you would a test. What's your hypothesis for turning these things live, right? So
understood. Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question.
Thanks for your great question. I'd like to turn it over to Vlad. Vlad had a question about minimum level of engagement. Do you want to? I've opened your mic. Please go ahead.
Hey,
Vlad.
Vlad, you there?
Okay, so he asked, what do you think about minimum level engagement when signing new customers, i.e., minimum price engagement or a minimum time frame?
Good question. Yeah. Probably comes back to either getting that first client or just if you're early on, you definitely have to talk about what's needed in the CRO. So, again, if they're doing CRO for the first time, like I kind of mentioned, they probably just don't have developers and designers either on the team at all or with extra time to spare. So you need to make sure you price that into it, because even if you don't like, even if the first, let's say the first 5 tests are like copy tests, or they don't need developers, so to speak, or at least maybe you have a little bit of skills, you can just do it yourself. If you have some coding skills, you still need a price in that time and the developers and designers. So just as like a ballpark, I know I started out less than I should. I think I probably charged like 2,000 per month, and that was like up to 3 tests per month. I usually like to price it around how many actual tests that we will launch, because that's it's just easy for the client to understand. Like, I'm not going to get into the weeds about like all the back end stuff, but like they at least know that's going to get them up to 3 tests. So that's, and maybe like a ballpark price now, like a frame of reference, and maybe somewhere in between. So I've been doing dedicated testing for like 4 years now, but we charge 10K per month, and we do anywhere from 3 to 5 tests. If they want to go faster than that, then we can do that, but it will be more money for that. So yeah, it also depends on your resources. Yeah. So
So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's like a built-in, like it's a package deal, right? So you're not then going back and saying, we need to hire a designer, we need to hire this. You're
exactly.
assuming that cost and saying, oh, to do this and to hard code this, it's like all baked into that fixed price.
Exactly. And honestly, we very rarely will work with clients where they have an existing team, because like we just have this assembly line now. Like we built
Mm-hmm.
something that works very efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to like project management is not something that's necessarily fun for me per se. So I don't want to be back. I don't want to have
What
like
are you
4 more
talking about? You're an
meetings.
Asana certified.
Necessary, right? Necessary is the best teacher, right? So it's the best. So but yeah, I mean, I have to do with that enough already, kind of a thing, right? So I would much rather say we'll solve your problems and ask
Mm-hmm.
them for more money, as opposed to saying we'll solve part of your problems and it
Mm-hmm.
will cost you less money, but that's also going our ROI for them will be throttled if we do that, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's all what we're in the business of, ROI, right? So
And I imagine it's much easier to manage your own internal team of personalities and people that you know than trying to then butt
right.
heads with some other internal project manager and competing priorities and stuff like that. I can
Yeah,
imagine
we
it
don't need
gets
another
messy
Slack
real quick.
workspace to join. We're trying to reduce those,
Right,
kind of thing.
right,
Exactly. So,
exactly.
and we don't, yeah, we don't want to be stuffy either, because our long-term vision is, and say like you have to, this is the scope of things. We have to do that to a degree, but our long-term vision is to help educate the client and teach them how to fish so that they don't need us long-term. Like that's the goal. So like we don't want
Mm,
to just be like, we'll even share SOPs with the client, kind of a thing.
mm,
That's probably not the greatest advice, honestly. But we're not like, that's our marketing, if that makes sense. Like we're
mm-hmm,
like, if
mm-hmm,
if they say, oh wow, like Ryan helped our team grow, and honestly, most people, if they leave us, they're still going to want to retain us from like an advice standpoint, right? But then they're going to
mm-hmm.
refer us to 5 other people, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah.
That's great. I love that. Teaching them how to fish. That's fantastic because I think that speaks to putting all the other pieces and parts together that you touched on.
CRO is
GOT?
hard enough. Like,
Right.
it's like,
Don't add barriers,
yeah, I'm not
right?
afraid like if it was like how to do social media, organic posting, like that's a more simple function, kind of a thing, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
they probably wouldn't need you, kind of a thing. But like CRO is, honestly, I think it's the most complex area of marketing. So
Mm.
I welcome sharing education, because I'm constantly learning. Like I have 2 mentors right now that are smarter than me, and they run more tests than me. And so I learn from them, because the industry changes so fast, right? So you just have to be constantly
Yeah, I
learning.
love that. I actually want to touch on that a little bit later on. GOT, I saw that you had another question about experiment velocity. Did you want to jump in and ask that? And then Vlad, I'll go back to yours.
No, I think that was that got covered in my last question.
Okay, so you covered both here. Okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Um, so yeah, speaking about that mentorship part or that pro in your corner, that kind of coach, can you talk a little more about that? Because when we had our setup call for this and we started talking about that, I thought it was a super interesting way to approach learning. Often, when we think about professional development, we think about $5,000, $10,000 courses, which of course very few people can afford. The workload that comes with investing your own personal time to do that really can be just overwhelming.
Totally.
So yeah,
Totally.
talk to us a little bit about what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like most people's trajectories where they probably start with courses first, because in the grand scheme of at least the time it takes, well, they can be cheaper, but you're absolutely right. Like they can be in that five to upper, thousands dollar range for sure. One thing that comes to as an example, it comes to mind at least is CXL, and that's actually where I kind of started to get a feel for the CRO world. I think we all kind of are aware of CXL.com, which is great for sure. But they're mini degrees as an example. If you just take the CRO mini degree, plenty to learn there. And some of the advice I gave around like the low traffic sites came from Pep himself, like the godfather of CRO. So like phenomenal advice, but it took me a while to find that. Like I've been through all that, but I mean, I think they even tell you how long it is to go through everything. I think it's like 80 hours or something like that, which is like, all right, I'll just take off two
Pretty
weeks and
daunting.
or 3 weeks. I don't know if I could do 40 hours a week of learning. That would be pretty exhausting. So, and for me, I only learn when I go on walks because I cannot like sit in front of my computer and just watch a video because I sit in front of my computer all day, every day. It's like I need to get out. And so I only have a X amount of time to learn, and hiring consultants is a shortcut. And it can seem, and it can just be more expensive, but obviously you very quickly, and this is something I think I'll probably get to in my slides, or at least just talk about, you very quickly need to know what your hourly rate is worth, right? Like, if you're able to get the same information from a consultant, someone, or just an expert CRO who's open to just talking on a Zoom call, which is what I do, and you can get there within 2 hours or 3 hours at the most, as opposed to it's nestled somewhere in that mini degree, like that could take you 15, 20 hours to find that, and and you still obviously don't get that, like, okay, give me some thought perspective of how it affects you today, some examples of how you worked on it with clients. And so I wish I would have done that sooner. I think that's one of the things I have in my slides of like, what I wish I would have done sooner is reinvested. I'm big on reinvesting money into the business, but reinvested it differently by hiring more people where I can have live conversations to learn from someone who's ahead of me by 2 to 3 years or more, where I'm like, okay, I want to be where they're at. And so then I'll maybe just ask them questions essentially. So.
Love that. I love that so much. It really penny dropped for me when you were talking about that, because it's a shortcut to success in a sense. It's really teasing out the threads that are relevant to your own business and your own clients and your own approach to how you want to grow, right? Rather
Right.
than trying to apply what you're learning into something that, you're not going to find a guidebook anywhere that's tailored to you. So, yeah. Vlad, I see here your next question. Which channels would you suggest to leverage for getting new CRO clients, i.e., LinkedIn versus cold email?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts on that. I think, I mean, I think the way to approach that is probably just always like thinking about like how would you want to be approached as well too. So I try to kind of like, I always like to take first party data and work my way out from it. And that applies here too. So like maybe you just know someone in your network right now where you don't even have to think about LinkedIn or cold email, but you just know someone that knows someone that knows someone, kind of a thing, right? Where you can just exhaust your internal network first in, an appropriate way, of course, like, hey, I'm opening up the CRO agency, or I'm just starting to do CRO as a freelancer. I really think I can do this for you, kind of a thing. Do you need it, or who might kind of a thing. That's probably the best way to start. Once that has been, I think, exhausted, is to, probably get on social media, probably. I think it depends on, again, going back to that niche statement of like, are you only going to work in like the SaaS vertical and for B2B clients? And then I would say, yeah, like that is absolutely LinkedIn. Maybe a little bit of Twitter. Twitter tends to be a little bit more technical clients. I tend to see like topic of SEO team seems to be more on Twitter versus CRO. You just kind of have to get a feel for that. So I really just use LinkedIn and Twitter nowadays. I'm not opposed to working with like B2C clients, and they usually have more data and can get to results faster, which is always great. But we actually have majority of our clients are B2B clients. I tend to have a little bit more fun because there's harder problems to solve, usually speaking. But you just have to kind of know your audience, where they hang out at. And my tip would be, don't try to do too many things. Like don't go over to Facebook and TikTok and things. As long as you know where your audience is at, just become an expert on that platform. Like if I had to choose one, I immediately would just choose LinkedIn, because that's generally where my audience is at, and it fits with how I like to share things. So just choose one and just make sure you actually, like you actually have a good offer. The friction isn't around the price right away as much as you may want it to be, but it's just around the foot in the door. And when you get that first client, don't have more than one client right away. Like that was my mistake, because I had like, I think 3 pretty fast. And it was just like, you really have to just make sure that first one is a home run, and there's no doubt about it whatsoever.
So yeah, are you open to digging into what the learning was from having those 3? Because that sounded a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the first one, it's not just about the work itself with a client. You absolutely are going to be inefficient right away. Like that's just get ready for it. It's going to happen. And so you need to be documenting what you're doing, like creating SOPs, because it's not, you're basically doing 2 jobs. Like you're doing the client's work, and then you're doing documentation of what you did. And you honestly, you may not even want to document right away, because you're just going to make a bunch of mistakes and things like that. So you kind of want to have loose documentation. Like if you think about writing a paper, you're going to want to write the headings of the page first. You're not going to want to write the paragraphs in the headings. You're just going to want to start with the outline. And then once you learn like this is working, this is not, then you're going to want to fill in those paragraphs of like, okay, this makes sense to do first, and this is exactly how I did it. Maybe you want to have a video or something like that. But it's very clear that you don't have to be the one that's doing everything, right? And you can hire designers, developers, project managers that can help you out, because CRO is a team sport. There's really no way around it. You could do it yourself. It's more rare for someone to be good in all those different areas.
Right.
And so yeah, that's why I had 3 too soon, didn't do enough documentation. And then it's like when you want to have 4 or 5 or 6, and I've never been one to want like a ton of clients, but even with just a small amount of clients, you can see how the tasks start to pile up. And if you don't have a system, it can be like, oh man, that's how you get the 42 on the inbox notification, or, very quickly. So yeah,
Right.
gotta build a system.
Right. Something that's manageable, right? And that you can replicate, sounds like. So I see a new question pop up from Yusuf. I see that even though you're at the back of the queue, I'm going to bump you up. The question is, actually, I opened your mic. Would you like to ask that directly?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys,
Please.
this is Yusuf
Hey,
from
Yusuf.
Prismfly. Nice to meet you guys. I've really loved the talk so far. My question is, when it comes to managing CRO, oftentimes you find folks with very technical skill sets, and that might differ from a personality that's naturally going to be more client-facing or dealing directly with the client. So I'm kind of curious from you, do you find it better for long-term client engagement to have CROs working directly with a client and kind of having that technical interaction, even if the client is new to CRO or it's their first time doing it? Or is it better to sort of have an account manager or a project manager in place to kind of sit in between the two and maybe translate it, some of the technical stuff into layman's terms, or just be able to be a little bit more high touch as it relates to the communication, updates, things like that, so that the CRO can focus on the meat and potatoes of what they do?
Awesome. Love the question. Good one for sure. I think it kind of comes back to like thinking through, like initially, of course, you're going to be smaller if you're just starting your CRO agency naturally, but if you want to grow into, a 20, 30, whatever client agency, then pretty quickly you're going to want to move to that project manager, account manager style. That's not my style. Like we have 8 clients right now, and we say no more than we say yes, because we really just want to make sure like it's a home run for both of us. And so, and I also like to have that high touch. Like that's my style, and that's honestly how I sell. Is like I'm not good at sales. Like I hate sales, but I love teaching, and so like that's how I sell, is through teaching. And like literally, if they want to see how this test is doing, I'll open up Convert and show them this is the variation. This is literally the code we're doing. We're not doing a drag and drop builder. You can rest assured it's going to look good on all devices. This is actually what we're doing. And being very transparent about that, about how the data is collected. Sometimes I'll even put screenshots in the slide deck when I go over results with clients. I'm like, this is actually from the tool. And I put links in the slides as well, so they can just go there. So they don't have to, find out where to go. They can literally just go to that report. What we do is we send all our tests as events to GA as well. So they never really go into Convert. They just go into Google Analytics or Looker Studio, because it's easiest for them, but at least they're really clear on this is how the sausage is being cooked, essentially. Like this is literally how it's happening. So there's no ambiguity, and trying to use, sometimes analogies work. Yeah, that's just kind of my style, is to like, because it goes back to the teaching and teaching them how to fish. Like if they want to actually do it themselves one day, they're going to have to know exactly how it works. And that's something that and we're okay with, essentially. So it's just kind of a question of like how you want to build the company long term. So.
Great. I love that. Okay, let's see here. Anonymous attendee. What's the ideal team structure of a CRO team?
Yeah, that's another good question. It kind of depends on, going back to how many tests you want to accomplish per month, kind of a thing. We generally will have anywhere from on per client basis, 2 designers, 2 developers. So like usually a designer that focuses more on the concepts and the ideation, which they're very much involved in the research as well too, because then the research gets translated into a Figma mockup, right? Like a design of like, this is what the research is telling us. And then a designer that helps more on the actual coding of the test, like the CSS inside of the test itself. And then 2 developers to actually, one really more so building the test, and then one on the QA side of things, just to make sure testing it every which way, so that when we go live, we can be trustworthy that it's going to be a successful start of the test. Myself kind of leading the, I guess, kind of the account management, project management side of things, but I also have definitely sometimes up to 2 project managers, one person more on like the notes from meetings and things like that, and the client communication and sending that back into Slack, and then one on the sometimes it's 1 to 2 project managers, but we use Asana, Slack, and just kind of our email sometimes for some clients, etc. So yeah, I don't think I left anything out there. That's generally the structure you'd want on all that. And depending on how technical you are, like I will do all of the Google Analytics side of things. Like I said, we send all of the results. We look at them and Convert, and that's how we generally make most of our decisions. But sometimes, as like an example, like a menu test or like a homepage test, where there's like, it's not as clear as like a product details page test. Like, did they add the cart? Like that's usually the main goal, right? It's pretty cut and dry. But like a homepage, there can be so many different goals. And I'm not a huge fan of bounce rate stuff, but like, honestly, that's usually when bounce rate is something that's pretty important to look at, of like, it's a directory page. Did they go somewhere else? But the client usually isn't going to be happy with like that answer alone. They're going to want to know the story more. And so if you're not comfortable with analytics, A, get more comfortable with analytics, but B, maybe hire someone to do more of that, because you want to be able to answer that to a client of like, this homepage test didn't just reduce the bounce, it helped funnel people more to the resources pages, leads,
Right.
etc. So,
Adding value everywhere.
Totally.
Okay, so I had one come in through a DM on LinkedIn, and I think this flows really well. The question was, how should you choose your tool stack when starting an agency?
Convert, obviously. No, joking. I had to just throw it out there. We use Convert now. I did
That's
not.
actually the wrong answer.
So we use Convert now, and that's how I found you guys, obviously. But we did not use Convert. Like we couldn't
No.
afford it right away. Like that's not the right thing to use. And then that goes into some of my initial slides is like so besides our testing tool, everything we use is free. Google Analytics, Tag Manager, Data Studio. Like we could pay for Tableau. We don't need to, but we started out, everything was Google basically. We use Google Optimize and it works great. Coming back to my statement on knowing your value of time. I know that if it would take me longer than 2 hours to do something in Google Optimize nowadays than Convert, I'd be losing money. So we use Convert because you can set 3 goals in Google Optimize and you can't integrate, it just would take longer to do things. And so, but when you're starting out, like I would use Google Optimize because, we read all the documentation kind of thing. That's what that's how I learned Google Analytics, is just being really clear. And honestly, once you learn the tools like Google Analytics, it can do just as much as any other tool can do. You just have to know how to use it. So I'm less focused on the tool itself, but more on your aptitude and ability to use it. Same goes with like Microsoft Clarity as like a heat mapping and video recording tool. Everyone's raving about it. And I've used it a little bit, but it's faster for us to integrate. And like, obviously we use Convert and be able to tag something quickly into Hotjar. And we also use Zuko for form recording. So like we can really quickly talk with other tools without having to code things, right? That's just, so it's literally a button click. Whereas Clarity and Optimize, they don't talk well enough together. And it's something, ultimately it's going to be a matter of time before Clarity, you have to pay for it. That's just a fact, unless they're something we don't know. But I prefer to pay for tools because I get support. If I had a question on how to set up Google Optimize or Clarity, I'm not going to get support on that. I'm going to have to just Google my way to my answer or pay someone else to help me with it, kind of a thing. So that's something to take into consideration too. So we use Hotjar we don't honestly use, we'll use heat maps on complicated tests for like menu tests and things where like you could set events in GA, but the analysis is so much easier in a heat map. We rarely use video recordings. We use a lot of answer pops, scroll pops, exit intent and open form answers of like, what's the one thing keeping you from signing up today or something like that. So we use Hotjar for things like that for qualitative research as well. Zuko, I mentioned, is for form analysis. We have a financial client with lots of forms. Again, just because you can do it in GA doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Right. Like setting the events.
Oh, it's free. This is great. Yeah.
Right.
I love it. Yeah.
Unless you're Simo Ohava and know how to like be a ninja to the nth degree with analytics, and the analysis gets to be really fuzzy really fast. And so Zuko's a great, used to be called for me Simo, but Zuko's a great example of like, it's just so much more fast to pay them to have great form analytics. And that's all they do. Talking about a niche, right? Like that's all they do is form analytics. Right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. We talked to Alan last time. He was fantastic. Him and Aldra.
Awesome.
I love that point that you're making about that trade-off for your own time, because I think that, even if you're here talking to this very niche group of marketers, or whether this applies everywhere, right? We tend to think of our time as free, and it doesn't matter if it takes me 10 hours. But the opportunity cost of that is, like you were saying before, it's like, how do you give that high touch? How do you then make sure that, you're training, onboarding a project manager on your team and things like that? Like, all that time has a cost. And I think that that's really, really important lesson, especially when you're starting a business or going through growth. So that free doesn't necessarily mean cheaper.
Totally. Yeah. Great point on how it's not just in testing, right? Like we sometimes just think about like, other things and it's just, I have 2 hours off or kind of a thing. So like we hire a maid, because like one, I hate cleaning. I'm really bad at it.
Yeah. I was telling Ryan the other day on our call, it's like, I hire someone to come and shovel my driveway. They come with a machine and they do it, and they've done it. It's finished in a minute. Literally, it's finished in a minute. They have a big machine. They come in and they do it. And, I paid like $400 a season for that. But to me, it takes 2 people 5 hours to get
Right.
that done.
It's expensive,
And
right?
it's expensive for your time, and then you're exhausted, right?
Right. I think it
And
comes back
cold.
to the what you also too of like knowing early on what you like to do and what you don't like to do. So sometimes if you really like to do analytics and you want to like learn it better long term, maybe don't hire someone to do it all, or at least have them teach you, because if you really enjoy it, that's great. Like you want to do more of that, right?
Right.
And if you're going to enjoy it, you're probably going to be an expert at some point, obviously just enough reps. And that's what I tell people. It's like, I'm not like, the reason I know more about analytics than you is like I just have more muscle memory. I've just been doing it longer, essentially. And so if you enjoy it, know that, and like be aware, have good self-awareness so that you aren't hiring out something you really enjoy to do, because that's something that comes to mind too, is like QA testing. Like I really don't like that, and so I will happily pay to pay for someone else to do that kind of a thing, right? But if I liked it, I probably wouldn't pay for that necessarily. Like I'd probably do it. So
Right.
I think self-awareness is a big thing that is underrated, and not enough people are aware that they need to have better self-awareness, right? So, but yeah.
I gotcha. Vlad, we'll do Vlad, and then we'll do the anonymous attendee. So Vlad, thanks for the input, Ryan. What are your thoughts about having some form of guarantees in terms of actual results or outcomes when signing up new clients?
That's kind of a sensitive topic for sure. I would
Yeah.
say don't do that.
That's
It's kind
the
of comes.
answer.
I like to what's the answer, and then support it with data, right? So there's your answer, and I'll support it. That comes to mind too of back in the SEO days. I used to do a little bit of SEO as well too, and sometimes we'll just like give input when people don't want it, but but it's like guarantee page one rankings, right? It's just like, well, you don't control the conversation like Google does, right? And so you have more control in CRO, but there's always things that you never, like, you don't have the controls to the website, right? Clients can make changes. So you'd have to have kind of goes back to the pay per performance testing model. You'd have to have really tight language in your contract, and you kind of have to ask yourself, do you want to go down that road of having that go down like, okay, in order to guarantee performance, that means that once a test is running, then you couldn't do these things. And you just have to be really, really clear about like the scope and what they can do, what they can't do, if you're going to guarantee that, right? And then it comes to mind too of like, well, what are their top traffic sources?
And that could
Right?
be really off-putting, I would imagine, for a new client that's, even though it's been referral, let's say, like to go in and go through this really detailed contract of telling them
Good
how
point.
to basically run their business.
Yeah, totally. Great point. And you don't control the traffic sources as well too. And so like, let's say that like organic would probably be the one that's at least the most kind of reliable, at least as long as we don't have any big algorithm changes. They've been doing things by the book. But let's say it's not organic as their main traffic source. Let's say it's email. Let's say it's ads. Well, what if their ads provider decided to change a bid strategy and it tanked, something tanked, or their budget went down, or they decided to not send emails? And so there's just so much more coordination that would have to happen. And you get into project management that I would not go down that route, basically. So.
Okay, great. Let's see here. So I've got one more in DM. Let's see. Let's go to this one, and then we'll take that one as the last one, unless anything else comes up. So anonymous attendee, how do you convince and show the value to your prospects initially? Prospects who don't know the CRO and the value of it. In my experience so far, CRO is treated similar to SEO, a slow but sustainable path to growth.
That's a good question. I'm going to share my screen with that slide I already shared.
Great.
Just kind of going back to the points around the money, right? We actually have I keep wanting to call it Google Data Studio, Looker Studio as of yesterday. That's the name of it now. But we have a dashboard where all they have to do is give us access to their Google Analytics and just read only. And it hooks in their Google Analytics, and it shows this is really more designed for e-commerce because it's easy to obviously just see the money there, but you can again assign the dollar value of a lead, but it can say where are they at right now, what's their current conversion rate, and just with like, say if we improved by 0.5%, and if we improved by the average order value by like 3%, what the net revenue change would be per month. And we even extrapolate that out to 1 year. And we could say, literally, this is the amount of money you would be making if we started testing with us. And if we calculated modest wins, we can at least expect, a 1% lift depending on where they're at. But, with CRO after 90 days and starting to hit our stride kind of a thing. So we know that we can affect that much, but really go to the money as fast as possible. And that's why I'm sharing this slide, right? If they wouldn't have tested, if they would have just rolled out this new homepage version, they would be losing $2,700 per week. And then just, extrapolate that out to a month, to a quarter, that literally just shows the amount of money they would be losing if they wouldn't be testing at all. So try to get to that dollar sign as fast as possible. Ecom is easy. SaaS or lead gen, you have to assign a dollar value to a lead, but just start with something, at least like an estimate, and be clear and tell them this is not, $100. We're just estimating that's the value of a demo. Tell us if you have a different number, tell us, but get to that dollar sign so they can literally see, just using some basic math, that this is what you could be gaining or retaining, right? This is the inverse of the we had a successful test. This is how much money you saved by testing it and not just turning it live. So it goes both ways.
I love that. Okay, so I'm just gonna float down here and see Q&A. Nope, they're all answered. Okay, perfect. Nothing in chat. Okay, so last question, and then I'll turn it over to you, Ryan. If there's anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to amplify, or anything that you want to just add as a takeaway for people, that would be great. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. So the last question I have here is, what is the best way to start and maintain a portfolio of test wins?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing that comes to mind that of the people involved in CRO, one of the other project managers essentially would really be in charge of the documentation. This is something that maybe that'll be my takeaway going further into that. But we document pretty ruthlessly inside of Airtable is what we use. But that's a great start, is we already are documenting on the client's behalf of so they're clear of not only what did we learn as a result, and what are the recommendations and next steps, et cetera, so that it can apply to the broader marketing. But that should be the start of great case studies, is using that data of we won for the client, and I can probably even pull up an example, but that pool supplies client that I talked about back in March, and we're kind of winding down with them as the season's winding down. I think we had 12 different wins. And so I just shared an Airtable with them of here's all the 12 wins. Here's literally everything is in Airtable, so they don't have to go do analysis somewhere else. But that's going to be the start of our case study, basically, is just I'm a fan of over detailed case studies. So it's as transparent as possible. So it's not we increased by 200%. And it's low numbers, great, kind of a thing. So I just oversharing, but it all starts with documentation. And if you don't do it while you're testing with them, it's just going to be so much harder for the client's behalf, more importantly, but then for your own case studies, it's going to be harder to go back and to, look at your annotations in Google Analytics or wherever you're looking at that. It gets to be harder to actually remember that. And with the new Google Analytics, it'll eventually be deleted if you don't, store it, kind of a thing. So over document, you will thank yourself long-term for sure.
I love that. You're also showing your client continuous value.
Absolutely.
And especially I think you touched on it earlier about the new client showing wins, kind of showing your work, as it were. I think that's something that can really build trust, is that level of transparency.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we all love to win and make them more money, but I often will tell them, losing is important, and we're going to learn sometimes more than we learn when we win. And so it's not just necessarily
which sounds so which
clients don't want to hear that, right?
No, they don't want to hear that. What? We're going to lose and it's going to be a benefit? Please explain that to me.
We're going to lose so much in such a graceful fashion. It's just going to be awesome. And no, but what I say is that you can't just run one test and say okay, this is a global hypothesis across all of your site now. But after you start to like, and I should be able to show an example of like tag how we the level of depth we go into with like
Yeah, that'd be great.
summarizing results, because that can start to apply to your email marketing, to your ads. You can start to say like motivation principles work better on the site as a whole, or maybe product pages.
Right.
So we should start to do more of those as a result, because we've gotten 4 tests that have won now, and we've tested all these different variations, and motivation tends to work best. So that can start to be more of a global hypothesis that it's not just for CRO anymore. Now it's marketing, right? So.
Right. Perfect. All right. So I will throw it back over to you to wrap it up, Ryan. This has been really great. Thank you so much to our audience for getting engaged. And if you're watching this and the recording, thank you so much for sticking around and getting lots of insight. And Ryan, take it away, please.
All right. I will share that Airtable as an example. So should be able to see Airtable here. And so this is that pool supplies clients. Let me maybe zoom in a little bit, but we just use Airtable so much and group it so many different ways. But we filtered this here. Let me remove that. So this is filtered only by winning tests. So these are all ones that have won over the year, or at least status. Let's see here. I think this would be outcome. So these outcomes are wins. So these are so then we can start to see as a roll up, right? The uplift change with that. So we can see ability tests have had the biggest uplift change. And I think this is a different field, but we can see the monthly contribution. I'll show you a different view. But the point is that we can see all then the ability tests from like, we tag all tests from like a psychological principle. I'm not a psychologist, but at least we can start to understand, like, if we go off of like BJ Fogg's behavior model of like motivation, ability, and prompt, like those are kind of the buckets we used for like what tests fall under that. So we can say these are the tests, that ability test on the homepage that we've run. And we have the hypothesis, the uplift, the learnings. Obviously, this is probably what the client's going to want to look at largely. But then everything else where we can look at things in like a Kanban view, the timeframes and all that. So everything is here. And the role of Airtable and why we use it like this is to be able to do our analysis and our meta-analysis inside of Airtable, and not to have to go to another platform to then make next action steps, essentially. So that's just kind of a glimpse of how we use that. And we were originally using like Google Sheets and Asana for a while, but it's just so easy to add images and things into Airtable, and to share it and to work collaboratively as well. So.
Wow, that's a great takeaway. Thank you so much. All right. So what else do you want to add, Ryan? Is there anything that you want to, if there's 2 things that you should not forget in the next 2 months, what would those be?
Yeah, go slower than what you probably want to go right away. Make sure that, again, because remember, your first client is going to be your first client and your hidden client of documentation and of writing down the steps. And so, because again, CRO is a team sport, you're never going to be able to, you can do it yourself, but you'll probably have like 1 to 2, maybe 3 clients at the most, and you'll be stretched pretty thin. So definitely document. And be a student in the right context. And kind of going back to that like statement of, actually at Traffic and Conversion, one of the speakers said, don't read books, hire the author. And I think that you should read books, but you should also hire the authors, right? And so
do both.
Don't not read books, but you should do both. Kind of going back to that, like, plenty of great courses out there. Just to name a few that I went through that I've gotten value a lot of from, were a lot of CXL versions. Invest put out some great content. That's how I kind of learned more initially about jobs to be done and that mindset. There's Optimization Academy. I forget the fellow's name, but he's over I think he's in France. And he has a lot of different, more specific modules. So I got some great value from that. And then Ruben DeBoer, all of his courses are on Udemy. And I keep telling him they're way too cheap. I think I paid $12 for one. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I would pay like $2,000 for this. So, so he's just fantastic. I would probably start with Ruben, because he really knows his stuff, works for online dialogue. And so many out there, but again, don't just learn that way, look to hire other people, because there's a lot of people out there that are really open to teaching and sharing and education. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll piggyback on that and say to our audience that I find that most people, when approached in a really authentic way of wanting to better yourself and wanting to learn, are usually open to having those conversations. You don't know unless you ask, and there's so much there. It's so easy to connect with people now, and so many people want to share information and bring up the average for their industry, and for their subject matter expertise, that people are, generally speaking, really, really open to being helpful. So
Great point.
yeah. Ryan, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they have some follow-up questions, or they wanted to, continue a little bit of a conversation with you, or they want to hire you, or they want to
probably
do
LinkedIn.
2 hours of
Right. Any and all the above, open to that, would probably be LinkedIn. You're welcome to email me too. I usually am quicker to respond on LinkedIn and less on email, but I'll get back to you either way. Ryan at rednableconsulting.com is my email address. But yeah, LinkedIn or email are usually the best ways.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today, for taking the time to watch the recording. We're really looking forward to seeing you at our next event, which will be coming up in November. And until then, keep testing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Morgan.